So many good ideas are flowing this morning, I can tell.
Mhm.
Well, welcome to the workshop Tuesday, business building advisory consulting coaching workshop, whatever you want to call it. Um, it's exciting to have everybody here, and we might have some other folks stopping on by who I invited from the community, and then Jonathan on the money of pulling new folks into the community. And I think maybe we're also uncovering weird ways that if they don't click on the right things, they don't get to the right place because of the Mighty Networks thing. So
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. But if you get a chance, head to the community and then reach out to those folks individually, say hi, and make sure they come to if they have any questions, or make sure they come to the community workshop. So anyhow, welcome everybody. Today's topic, Paul, you posed the topic um, this week, which uh, what was the you give us the topic in a nutshell.
I think it's more or less translates to a subset of branding, but my whole the thing that you and I have been working on, Jason, with the clients for Emissary, which is my company, um, we're trying to get people to realize, in a nutshell, there is a saturation point of your personal brand, at which point you can talk about pretty much whatever you want, and people will click and they'll buy and they'll listen and they'll do whatever you want them to do. And then we run into the vast majority of people who have not reached that saturation point. And I'm not talking just globally. I'm talking about even if you're just targeting a specific niche, but nobody knows who you are.
Mhm.
And the danger, whether you're doing this as an author or whether you're doing it as a service provider or whether you've patented a product and you're trying to take it out to market partially through personal branding, the danger is a presumed level of familiarity that does not exist yet,
Mm.
that has to be built, that has to be earned, that has to be cultivated by going with a giving hand. But when you go with a giving hand, the question is, how do you present it in a way that simultaneously respects that distance that you currently have with that audience?
Right.
And you've educated me on this a lot recently. I've really started to think about it in every time I pick up a pen or make a phone call or anything. How do I, if that level of familiarity isn't currently there, what am I going to talk about and how am I going to present it so that the you build that next level of trust, intimacy with that person? And it took me back to my days as an insurance salesman because, of course, I used to joke that insurance is the subject that must not be named, right? Nobody wanted to talk about it. Nobody understands it. Nobody likes it. Not even insurance people understand it or like it or want to talk about it. And so I said to myself, I've got to find something else to talk about. And one of the best examples, this is a story to sort of kick this off, and then I'm gonna stop talking. But one of the best examples I can think of is back in 2012, the US government passed a reform of the flood insurance laws. And so they were going to, without really briefing the public on this, they were just going to skyrocket the flood insurance premiums so that if you decided to purchase a property in a flood zone, you could expect to pay a $10,000 a year insurance premium in some cases. And I was paying attention to this, but I was also traveling among a group of realtors because I would go to the local multiple listing sales association meeting every week and we would have breakfast and there would be presentations. So I got wind of this and I said to myself, I better tell them about this. I bet they're not paying attention to this. So I volunteered, you could volunteer for a 3 to 5 minute spiel. And I got up there and I gave a presentation and I basically warned everybody in that room, in the area where we lived, there were floodplains nearby. People did buy houses in them and they did And there were people in that room who were in the middle of transactions or working towards transactions where they would, once that law took effect, their clients were going to get a 3,000% increase on their flood insurance premium. So I warned that whole room and I told them, this is what's going to happen. This is what it's going to look like. Here's the flood zones that are nearby here. So if you're doing deals right now, if you're working towards deals, cancel them, or at least let your clients know and let them know, we should probably look somewhere else. So I got done with that. I didn't say a word about, I'm an insurance agent, I work for Liberty Mutual, come get a free quote. I didn't say anything about that. But people came up to me and they were grateful and appreciative that I had warned them. And a couple of them said, yeah, I'd like for you to look over my insurance stuff. So I had built one higher degree of trust at that point by following the very principle you talked about. So there's the story in a nutshell. And now I'll cede the floor.
Okay. So to recap, what you're saying is when you want to engage in some sort of transaction with an individual, they have to be familiar with you first. One of the things that I think the reason, if I'm recalling this, came up between you and me was that the idea of specificity, being very specific in your offer until people are familiar with you, and then you can get more broad in your offer.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way to a successful transaction. Is that true?
I think so. I think but even more than being specific about something that is currently important to people you don't know well.
Hmm.
So I could have gone out there and booked that speech and talked about what are the great values of having life insurance. And some people in that audience might have cared about that,
Mhm.
But when I framed it in the context of real estate transactions that several of those people were working on, and they in turn would turn to the affiliates around them for things like mortgages and insurance and plumbing and electrical contracting, and and landscaping. I need you to come and work on this house. And now those deals are going to be torpedoed. Everybody in the room was like, whoa, that is important to know. If I have clients in those flood zones, I should tell them about this. Right. So yeah, it's about being specific, but it's also about being specific about something that you could make an educated guess and say, this would matter to a great majority of the people that I'm trying to reach.
You're muted, right?
Thank you, Jason. Paul, I think what you did was, number one, you provided a lot of value with the information that you took and passed along to those people. And also you posed a potential impending problem that likely a lot of these people were going to end up facing very soon down the line. And so with that mix of, what you're saying, like fear and a problem to be solved, and then the fact that you're offering the value right at the onset without even asking for anything, in itself provides so much value and trust. Um, with that, I'm sure those people looked to you and saw you as a resource. And if they didn't work with you, they at least asked you a question or asked you for help one way or another.
Yeah. And yesterday, Jason and I were working with one of our emissary clients, and he went and did a book signing over the weekend at a Barnes and Noble. And he experienced several sort of lulls in the action, right? There were people that came and bought books, and then there was this sort of period where he was standing there at a table, really not sure what to do. And he said that felt weird to me. I didn't feel right not helping or not doing things. And he said, I feel much better when I'm giving a demonstration and teaching about the subject matter. He said, I didn't feel like I could just walk around the store and stalk people and say, hey, buy my book, buy my book. We know that doesn't work. And so what we proposed as a strategy to him going forward was, okay, so then number one, let's put you in more situations where you're teaching, because when he does that, the book sells itself. Like, he just has a line of people waiting to buy the book after he's done. But let's broaden it here a little bit and let's create a way of presenting your book tangentially towards an audience that isn't really thinking about the subject matter of the book, but what they are thinking about is something that's common to everybody in that group. And we sort of settled loosely on this idea of pursuing your passion versus earning a living, right? And because in some cases, like Jason will tell you, right, pursuing your passion is a downright dumb idea. It's not gonna get you anywhere, but you can't not do it either. And so we said let's formulate a talk around that, because that'll broaden the amount of people you can talk to. And when you get done, there'll be a line of people waiting to buy your books.
So in his case, to clarify, unless I missed, he's sorry, fumbling over my words. So to clarify, he counsels people on or trains people how to grow roses and sells a book about how roses impacted his life, or growing roses impacted his life. He's also has been successful in construction for like 40 years. Now he goes around and gives classes in roses and has built rose gardens and is a consulting rosarian for the National Rose something or other. So you and I might not care about roses, but we do care about being successful in business and then also having fulfilling hobbies.
Mm-hmm.
For him, this transition into how do I still impact the world now that I'm kind of winding down my construction business and giving it away, letting my son carry that on. How do I carry on, in the world?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the speech that we talked about for him. We might not care about roses, but there is a framework perhaps of thought about how to build a fulfilling life that is not only meaningful from a productivity standpoint, but meaningful from a generally doing good in the world and having finding fulfillment in your soul.
Yeah, I thought, and I think so. So pulling back from those specifics, what were what we what felt like a really great topic to explore was, what do you do? Let's say you get invited to give a talk, or you're part of a group that meets, and they have, like I had at that MLSA meeting, they have an open mic session, and you can get up there and talk. You could get up there and talk about your product. You could get up there and talk about yourself. Some people can get away with that. Most people can't. So if there's an opportunity, there's another option. You can just be a fly on the wall and not do it. Or you can get up there and talk about something that's interesting and important to that audience. And then, I'm interested to hear, if you put yourself in that situation, right? If you put yourself in the shoes of that person, in the shoes of the person who could get up and give the talk, what automatically comes to mind, and what are some of the things you would go through to make sure that you position that moment of exposure that you have in the best possible light, so that you do create that next level of trust and familiarity.
I think also as far as like introducing yourself to new people who don't know you, I think there comes the point where it's people who already know you or are familiar with your products. They don't want to be given the rundown again. You know what I mean? There's that point where like you're introducing it to new people, you're building that familiarity, that next level of trust, but you don't want to be too what's it called? Redundant with the people who are already familiar. Something that's okay. This will age me down a little bit, but someone that comes to mind in doing this, someone that comes to mind in doing this is because we want to make sure that people people in the audience are aware, like, we kind of introduce it as, like, assuming they don't know anything about it, right? We want to make sure there's, like, a baseline. And so what's gonna age me down a little bit is if you see in interviews with Taylor Swift, even though everybody on the planet knows who she is, you see a lot of times in interviews when there's something that everyone probably already knows about, she'll still address the audience and be like, "Oh, there's this thing I did," even though probably everyone already knows about. "There's this thing I did," and rope them into it in a very short little blip, but then address it for the people who already knew everything about it. And I think that, as far as, like, even with Ryan or Paul and introducing that little blip, people who already knew you as an insurance guy, they're gonna trust you even more. They're gonna be like, "Yeah, he knows his stuff." And the people who didn't already know you as an insurance guy, they're gonna be like, "Whoa, how do you know this? What is this about?" And that's gonna introduce them. There's that little blip where it reinforces the trust people already have with you and introduces you to people for the first time without overdoing it with the redundance. I don't know if that makes sense. You're muted.
Kind of like a small foreshadow in like the beginning of a story. Like, oh, we did this, and then you
Mhm.
lead back into it. So that way people can recognize it as you're talking about it because it was mentioned just prior. And for those people who already know you, already know the background as the presenter or as the person that's providing a solution, um, there's not, there doesn't need to be a lot of intro to it, but then bringing in the topic as a short foreshadow to the solution that you're bringing in, I think is what you're getting at. Am I right, Naomi?
Yeah, basically bringing in, like, making sure that you address the people who don't know anything about it and sharing, "Hey, this is what this is about," including them in, because everyone wants to be
Yep.
included, right? So it just makes it so people who don't know anything about it feel included, feel invited in, and it makes it feel relevant to them.
What do you think, John? You-
Yeah. So essentially, we're talking about cold calling a room, right? And assuming all of the context that goes into the room that you're speaking in, uh, making yourself relatable so that people have a personal connection with you prior to engaging in whatever lead or bridge you may like to make, either in further relationships or product. That's kind of what I'm hearing. And then we're talking about different ways of doing that. Yeah. Yeah. Frankly, I think fair enough. So I've been listening and thinking of ways to further the conversation, but we're kind of hitting it from 4 or 5 angles. So I didn't have much to add specifically to how to further progress that cold call. Uh, Aside from perhaps, I believe in the immense beauty and power of questions. One, because questions are an immediate psychological invitation, regardless of if they care about it or not. And two, they evoke curiosity. So typically for myself, I like to lead almost every engagement with new people with a question that I've typically put some level of thought into. And that, from what I've seen, works both with an audience and an individual or group. So, like, how do you feel if at the end of the day you still had energy to love your kids, but you've had a successful and accomplished day? And immediately that begins a conversation. And then we can go in whatever direction that is. And then I can bring up the fact that at some point, well, hey, by the way, if you want that energy, I have a solution that you may be interested in. Regardless, thank you so much for your time. And I hope you guys have extra grace when you get home today, whatever. Right. So you don't even have to make the hard sell there. But I don't know. I think the questions lead a lot and you can bookend with them as well, which further adds that curiosity. Like if there was a product, if there was a tool that could give you that energy, would you be interested? And if you are, let me know. Otherwise, have a great day. And then it also lowers that fatigue because um, they don't have to put their guards up to say no, right? Or to say yes or no, or feel like they're being sold. The only other thought that comes to mind on it, now that the juices are flowing a little bit more, is giving everyone an easy no, which can be done with that question as well, right? And not a forced one. Like, do you like clean drinking water? Now you forced everyone to say yes, right? Like, who doesn't want to drink clean drinking water? So if instead it's like, hey, are you opposed to meeting for 15 to 30 minutes? There's a couple of people in this room who've heard me ask that. Are you opposed to a 15 to 30-minute conversation? I'm happy to set it up. No, I'm not opposed. Cool. Guard went down a little bit. They had the freedom to tell me no right off the bat, which freed them up to say yes to what I was hoping to do, which was connect. Both Paul and Jason have been gracious enough to connect with me after me asking that question. So in the room, you can help with that as well, I think. Hey, who here's opposed to this or that? Or who here by raise of hands is opposed to X? Those types of things I think can help to immediately spark the interest to then bridge it to that topic you were referencing, Paul, that is specific and currently important. What's everyone think about that?
I had a story come to
Mhm.
mind. And it's funny, I had a story come to mind because the next thing I was going to suggest after the hook of the question that you're talking about there, John, is to tell a story. So, um, I'm going to butcher the details of this. So if I sound like I'm tripping up or missing details, I probably am. Um, but there's a story of a guy who was I think he was a life insurance salesman, and he was a very high performing one. And a rookie um, pulled him aside one day and said, "I don't get it. What, I'm getting doors slammed in my face, I- or I'm getting, I'm getting past the door slammed in my face, but I get 30% of the way through, and then it's gone." And he said he did, and the veteran, said he did this interesting thing, and I don't exactly remember the details, but he would do something like, um, he would say, um, "I've left something in my car. May I let myself in when I come back?" And the homeowner would say, "Yes." And it was something psychological about getting that person to say yes, 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 right? Yes to one question after another. In the same manner as what you're describing there, where you're lowering the defenses just a little bit. And I've found, not all the time, but in many instances, that once you get that initial lowering of the defenses, once you've got the hook in there and people are interested, one of the best things I've had is a story or an analogy to describe, first of all, here's the problem. And even better if you also have a solution, if you also have a story that can describe the solution later on. But something that's well known, popular, famous in the culture, recognizable refrains, or you know, just something where you can easily paint the picture verbally if you don't necessarily have a visual aid. Um, that would be my next instinct. Would be once you've hooked them, it's time to start inviting them into a story and finding them and helping paint a picture that they can see themselves in that story. I don't know. That would be my next instinct, but maybe that's a little bit premature. Anybody got anything that they think should come before that?
I think it depends on the context of the interaction, right? In the scenario you provided, where there's an open mic, um, so perhaps because it's a more one-sided conversation, you're reading the room. Yeah, you get the question, you gauge uh, engagement, and then if the question falls flat, you make a joke about yourself. If that falls flat, it's probably better just to walk off. But but once you have that engagement, sure, go into the story that's aimed at whatever that direction is with intentionality. I mean, I'd be comfortable giving that a try and seeing where the room goes dead still and I'm have their interest versus where everyone starts scrolling on their phones and hoping that I choke. Uh, you know, I'm familiar with the go for yes mentality. And like I was kind of making fun of it with the water scenario, right? You get a telemarketer and they call you like, "Hey, do you like a nice cold glass of clean water?" Yes. And then they like take you down this path of yeses and like you're like, "Just shut up and leave me alone." And you end up hanging up the phone in frustration. Which is where the antithesis of that is giving the freedom to say the no up front so that the guard's already down and they have the ability to make decisions done. Regardless of the method, I'm sure both are used productively often. Uh, I guess I would lean as a personal preference in a group setting as a speaker towards giving the freedom to say no because I can't read the individual checkout rate of if I try to use the yes method. But once again, the premise of this conversation, if I'm not mistaken, is in a cold setting, building some level of human connection to hopefully spur a secondary conversation or transaction. In which case, brevity is the essence of wit, I think, as well. If you can go up and in a lightning storm of 90 seconds to 5 minutes, hit them, and then step off and make yourself available, that's the only other thing that comes to mind as something of value is keep it short.
So what I'm hearing is a distinction between perhaps social media, where we want to address specific pain points or uh, questions that people have, even if they don't necessarily directly relate to our offer. We want to put our faces out there so that people become familiar with us and begin to trust us over time, that we know what we're talking about and we're personable. And if they met us in person, that, it'd be a fine chat. After which we can tie in to what our offer is. So work from points of similar, work from their particular issue to points of similarity to the offer. Um, that's one direction I hear. The other thing I'm hearing is if you're invited to speak in front of someone, how do you build that familiarity? And I think there's a benefit to being invited to speak because you were invited and there's a lot, and they already chose to come to that. They already chose to listen to you, and you have there is some social proof because there's probably other people in the room. And you've also received a recommendation, consciously or subconsciously, from the people who invited you. So the fact that there's authority there gives you authority. They gave you authority. They imparted the authority to you. In which case, the barriers are already down, even subconsciously. The other thing that we're talking about are like specific tactical elements, which things like get to a no quickly because it provides the person some autonomy, and the belief that they're going to make a decision. And however, we'll the belief that they have control over their decision, which is true to a point. And there's all sorts of studies that prove that you can shift people in their decision making and plant the seeds for new decisions. But get to a no quickly instead of asking for a yes, because the yes, a lot of people are predisposed to not want to say yes. And if we're talking about like emails and the incessant LinkedIn messages, which I'm not offended by, but I get messages 5, 7 a day of people asking me if I am interested in something. Like, I think the newest guy was like, "Hey, would you mind having a conversation about golf?" That was the one I received yesterday. And I was like, I don't respond. I just say connect. That's fine. You can connect. And he's like, I like talking about golf. And I know he's a golf trainer, like a virtual golf trainer. I don't care for golf. But I will 100% connect to you because I might know somebody. I know people who really, really enjoy golf, and I might connect you up with them. So I value the connections, even though I'm never going to take him up on his offer. I'm really there to just be a conduit. So he will never sell me on improving my golf game because I don't care. But he might join the community, or I'll connect them up to the people who do care about their golf game. So there are, I think all of these things we're talking about are applied differently in different circumstances. I think the overarching thing that pulls together in my mind is just the idea of story. And if you want to go view I think pretty good presentation, it's in the community under storytelling, the power of storytelling. And it makes the point that people act out of their beliefs. And if you want to change their beliefs, you don't need facts. You need very few facts. And the power of changing a person's belief lies in your personal story. So, John, you're selling energy stuff. If you come out of the gate and you're like, hey, I sell energy stuff. Well, that's cool. I get TikToks on it now all the time from some dude selling some energy stuff. I don't know him at all. And I never know why they chose to do that. It never says, but you'll have a higher probability of swaying me if you said, here's my storyline, which led me to selling energy tablets. And Paul, to your point of this author, I'm probably not going to buy a book on roses because I'm not going to plant roses. However, if he gives me a speech or tells me some story about, hey, how I got into roses because, and starts talking to me about how he was a successful construction business founder and worked hard and had a pastime, and he found his pastime in roses, but his book unpacks how you can find a more fulfilling life by balancing your work and your pastime. I might be interested in that.
Yeah. And I
So
think I
yeah.
think if some of the things we were talking about was you find solace in the pastime, but you also find other people, you find community in the pastime. And oddly enough, the two become symbiotic so that where you go for life ends up having a positive impact on where you go for a living, and vice versa, right? The more you share and exude your passion in and around the business community and talk with people and conversations, the more likely you are to eventually run into, oh, I'm into that too, right? And all of a sudden you've got an even better degree of trust and intimacy with a certain person that you meet because they share your passion.
I think it's my name. Okay. Good. Um, the way I see it is like people love like good story going on a journey and they love resolution. So when I listen to like great speeches um, or things I resonate with, it typically starts with like a short story about a person or a company, a little bit about their background, and then a post problem. Like for example, in the case of a contractor who became a gardener, rose gardener or something like that, saying that, hey, I retired and now what's the next step for me? And then what's that journey look like, right? In that story. So people are now following that story because they're seeing that there is a conflict with regards to what this person is doing next and where they're going. And then as they're following that on and once the resolution um, has been presented as to why this person started gardening and growing roses, people will see that and relate to that. And maybe there'll be some people like, oh yeah, I'm on my way into retirement as well. What did you do to find your passion or things like that? So having that conflict and then ending with that resolution in a really good story that people can essentially gravitate to, um, also builds trust and also builds value as well. And I think when you do something like that in a setting, an audience, or even one-on-one, it's really easy to create trust, familiarity, and be easily relatable to that person. And if we're talking about sales, that's when you can start asking them questions. So, what is it that you would like to improve, or as you're transitioning, what are you like? What's your passion? What do you like to do? And I think when we get to the part where it's leading at a transaction, building that familiarity and then asking, really good, uh, qualifying questions or probing questions will get the person to engage with you more. So you could find more of what they're looking for, what their need. And then from a sales perspective, be able to provide that solution. I think, um, I, I'm wondering, Paul, is that what you're what we're getting at here with regards to this conversation?
And and the reason I bring it up, Ryan, is, obviously Jason and I are targeting authors who have, they have some degree of influence among a small group of people. And the objective in writing books, especially, is to develop a larger degree of influence with a larger degree of people. Maybe not the largest in the world. Maybe it's only twice as big as you currently have, or 5 times as big as you currently have. But you always have to face the fact that wherever you're going to get those people from, they currently have no idea who you are. And so there's zero reason for them to engage with you. And what we're trying to do is anticipate that and demonstrate an awareness of that,
Mhm.
and have that undergird everything that we're doing. So, Rose Therapy, Ron Daniels is one example. We've got several other prospects we're talking to, and we're having essentially the same thread pop up. They've got a, a title or an idea or something that they think that they're just like, this is it, right, for the book. And we come along and we look at that and we say, can the average person who has no idea who you are relate to that? Can they gravitate toward it? Does it hook them and make them curious and say, I haven't heard that before. What's that all about? Because if it doesn't, that's your shot. You got one shot. You're a books, it's a book cover sitting in a bookstore or online somewhere, and it's this person looking at it, right? You got one shot to hook them. And it lasts about 3 to 5 seconds. So you can't just put any old personal slogan or this is my personal maxim. Well, that's very nice. But if it doesn't mean anything to an average person who doesn't know you, I'm sure it means plenty to your mom, right? Right. Everybody's mom. Jason used to have this joke. Yeah, of course, if I show my book to my mom, she's going to love it, right? The question is, will all the other people who are not your mom love it? Because that's where you begin to acquire the objective you're after. But, leave aside books. It doesn't matter what it is you're trying to put out there. If you're trying to sell yourself
Any
as a
content.
subject matter expert or service provider, and I think it's even true with products, especially if you're trying to push a new product into the marketplace. I met a young guy the other day who has created a product, oddly enough, for golfers. Jason, we should make an introduction. He's doing okay with it, right? He's got it in a couple stores. He's running Facebook ads on it and all that. So what are some other ways that he could multiply that and not face the financial pressure of a roller coaster sales cycle? Well, one way he could do it is by beginning to offer to a likely buyer of that product, whether it's a retail buyer or a supply chain buyer or just an individual buyer, is himself or his message discussing something that is of importance to them in the moment, whether they know him or not. I think that's
Um,
probably going to increase his chances. Go ahead.
absolutely. Absolutely. Just the other day, I met a YouTuber who I follow, and young guy, 28 years old, has like about 50,000 followers, and has done, like, I would say, is in a place where he continued to grow. And we were talking, and he was like, well, what should I do? I'm going to start traveling, and I'm wondering if I should go for authenticity in my content, or if I should go for more like a commercial sort of approach to make more money. And he also told me that he felt like he was struggling with money at this point. And I told him, I was like, well, when I first started seeing your videos, what really gravitated me, or what really attracted me, was just authenticity. Like, you started to you told a story about how you went from one place, one environment, to the next, and really just told that story from your point of view. with as much authenticity as you were showing us. And I felt that I was really able to relate to that. And and so my advice to him was, look, you're talking about replicating yourself in these different countries and trying to replicate your business model in these different countries as well. What's worked for you so far? Your authenticity. So maybe start there and tell that story in the place that you are, because the environment's going to change. Maybe the situation change. Maybe the venture that you go on are different. But as long as you stay authentic and tell the story from your point of view, provide some sort of resolution for people to look towards and things like that, I think people will be able to relate, continue to move forward with it. I think that's not much different than any content provider or author, director, actor, or something like that. It's really just about conveying a story um, with some sort of conflict that can be resolved later, and providing that relatability with regards to trust in terms that are concise and relatable to most people who are out there, at least in my opinion.
Well, I think that everyone wants autonomy. And I think the biggest hook you can give somebody, whether you're selling something to them or you want to give them a message that speaks to them, is giving them autonomy. It's like what John was saying about letting them have a no right off the bat. And authenticity. When someone's authentic, you feel like they're talking to you like a real human being. They're not trying to sell you something. You feel like they're just trying to share a story. You feel like they're just trying to connect with you, a human to human connection. I think commercially we lose that connection a lot of times. And so like the biggest thing, like was what Paul was saying about making it a story, like the telling a story, making it your own, being authentic in how you share it, giving someone that autonomy. That's the biggest, quickest way. That is gonna connect with everybody right off the bat. Um, what was John saying about, how would you like the energy to connect with your kids at the end of a work day? That gives someone autonomy. That lets them know, "Hey, I'm aware you're human just like me." You know? It just that quick grab, the quick hook into their, its relevance to you, like what Paul was saying with the flood insurance, you made it relevant to everybody. You made sure that everybody knew that you knew that they were human and they were going to be affected by this and they were going to be impacted by this. And I think that that might be the biggest thing when it comes to branding, when it comes to that message, introducing someone to yourself. Make whatever you introduce about yourself, give the audience, give the person autonomy on some level, some way, shape, or form. Give it that quick hook, that quick introduction to I see you as a human being, and I want to give you some of myself because you are a human being, and I see you, and I want to provide something of value into your life as well.
That's good.
I have, sorry, Jason. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm just going to say we've got a handful of minutes left, and one thing I want to leave time for is everybody to figure out what's a takeaway that's applicable to you today and the projects that you're working on, and what are you going to do with that. So leave time for that. Go ahead, Paul.
I was just, well, since Naomi started that thread, I'm gonna I'm gonna pile on that by saying a friend of mine is a Orthodox Jewish rabbi, but he was also an ethics professor, and so his way of attracting an audience is lovely, and I've had the privilege of participating in it many times. And what he does is he poses these sort of ethical dilemma questions that really don't have a clear cut answer, and then he interviews people and invites others to participate in the discussion. You're faced with this dilemma. What do you do? If you choose this path, then these things will happen. If you choose that path, then these things will happen. Some of them will be good and some of them will be not so good. And what's the objective here? Well, the objective is to really activate the thinking. But it's amazing how much more connected you feel to the process when instead of someone telling you what you should think, they say, what would you do in this scenario? And s- I've been thinking about that a lot. I've used it. I would not call myself a master of it the way he is as an ethics professor, but I think it's tremendously useful. Mm, and tying this into the whole autonomy thing that John mentioned at the outset, whatever message you're putting out there, if there's a way to invite the recipient into how they would view the situation or what it means to them,
I don't
that would be my takeaway.
I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I'm going to say this to add on to that thought, and people can research this and run with it. When you ask a prospect to help you solve the problem, you will also make a sale. So just look into that, asking somebody to help them solve your problem. Yeah. Okay. So we've got just a handful of minutes left, and I do want to stay on time because I like the idea of ending right on time. Um, the I'll kick us off here. The takeaway that I hear today is this idea of familiarity, that people need to know you. People need to see you more than you think they do. So take the stranger at a grocery store thing. When you saw your teacher at the grocery store, you realized she was a person, or he was a person, and it recalled to your mind, oh, I remember I had you as a teacher. I never would have thought them otherwise. So from my task, my takeaway is I'm going to put more content out and care less about making sure it's the right content. Just care about being seen. Uh, that's my takeaway. Next, and we've got keep it short.
I can go.
Yeah.
I recorded a podcast episode. At this point, it's more like a vlog. Because I kind of do long form, and I recorded one that was like an hour long the other day. And I just kept going on it, and even in the episode, I'm worried about like oversharing it or too much from my perspective or just too much in my own head. And the takeaway that I took from this is that I need to be less concerned about whether or not there is some kind of overshare and more concerned about whether or not it's authentic and whether or not people can relate to the message that there is. And I think there is. I think this kind of gave me the I need to I'm gonna just release it. And you know what? If people don't connect, that's fine. But if people do connect and if it can help somebody feel more familiarized with me, great. I don't know. I kind of more about autonomy and giving people autonomy and connecting on that authentic level.
Awesome. Thanks. All right. Next, you have 1 minute or less.
Start with authenticity and sow the seeds wide and far.
All right. Love it. Paul?
Draw people into the conversation, like I was talking about with the ethics professor. Solicit as much as you can their input. What would you do? What does this mean to you? And does it ring? Does it resonate?
Awesome. Well, this is the Tuesday workshop where we take what's been resonating. And Paul, you brought this topic up because it's been resonating over a handful of conversations over the past couple of days. And then we just look at it from a number of different perspectives and then take what we can from it and utilize it in our projects. So everybody, go about your business. Have a great day. If you need anybody in the community, reach out. We're always happy to help. Thanks for coming.
Great to be together again.
See ya.
All right, bye-bye.
Have a good one.